Have you ever just stopped and wondered, why are you you? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a really fascinating idea about our existence. And believe it or not, it was all sparked by one single, very profound question.
All right, let's just jump right in. We've all asked ourselves this at some point, haven't we? Why this body? Why this particular life? It's got to be one of the deepest, most fundamental questions we can even ask about who we are.
So this whole thing, this entire explainer, it was kicked off by a really specific and, yeah, pretty provocative question. Now, it's not meant to be some kind of sweeping generalization. Think of it more like a tool, a way to kind of probe at the deeper logic of why we show up in the world the way we do.
But here's the thing, the response to that question, that was the real game changer. It just completely flipped the script. It's like, of course, woundedness, that's not a male thing or a female thing. It's a human thing. It's universal. And that brings us right to the core idea we're going to unpack here. The theory is that every single lifetime is basically an experiment in balance. The whole idea is that a soul chooses different lives over and over to really experience the entire spectrum of what it means to be human. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, there's a pretty powerful metaphor. Instead of thinking about gender as this rigid, you're either this or that kind of thing, picture it like a tuning fork. You know? The idea is that each life we live resonates with a totally unique mix of frequencies all along this huge spectrum of masculine and feminine energies.
So, you might be wondering, what are these polarities we're talking about? Well, a soul might choose to explore a life that's all about action, assertion, and creating order. And then in the very next one, it might be all about receptivity, nurture, and just flow. The key takeaway here is that we all have bits and pieces of both inside us. The real journey, it's learning how to bring them all together.
Okay, so that's the individual journey. But what happens when you zoom out? How does this play out on a global scale? For all of us. This is where the whole idea goes from being about our personal stuff to looking at the woundedness of our entire civilization.
So according to this line of thinking, a major root cause of our collective wound comes from patriarchal societies that have for a very long time suppressed the feminine pole. And we're not just talking about women here, we're talking about suppressing those qualities in everyone. Things like intuition, feeling deeply, connecting with others, you get the picture. And what's the result of that? Well, it creates this deep imbalance that really, it hurts everybody, just in different ways. For women, it often shows up as direct oppression. For men, it can be something like an emotional amputation, right? They're basically taught to sever the connection to their own feelings.
You know, this leads to a really interesting idea when you think about families. What if the person who always feels like the odd one out, the black sheep, what if they're actually a soul who chose to take on a really tough job? The job of healing some old, unhealed wound that's been passed down through the family line for generations.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the problem, both on a personal level and for us as a whole. So, what about the solution? Where's the path to healing? Well, that brings us to another really beautiful metaphor, the rhythm of wholeness.
Let's break that down. The first piece of the puzzle is the vessel. This is a way of talking about the feminine energy inside all of us. It's our ability to simply hold our experiences, to sit with our feelings, and to really connect with other people.
And the second part, that's the ore. This represents our masculine energy. It's all about action, the ability to apply logic, to create direction, and to actually move forward in the world with a sense of purpose.
So here's the kicker, the most important part. Wholeness isn't about picking one over the other. Not at all. Real healing, that happens when the vessel and the ore find their rhythm, when our capacity to feel and our capacity to act start working together in perfect harmony. That's the goal.
All of this really makes you stop and think about how we see our own pain, right? It makes you ask, are these wounds just flaws? Is there something broken in me that I need to fix?
But what if that's the wrong way to look at it? What if our woundedness isn't a mistake? What if it's actually the engine of this whole reincarnation thing? The very friction that's needed to polish the soul?
Let me give you a concrete example of how that engine could work. So imagine a soul that lived a life full of machismo. Maybe it gets tired of that, and next it chooses a life defined by vulnerability, just to experience the complete opposite and start to heal. And then, after learning from that, it might come back again to embody masculine energy, but this time, it's filled with a tenderness and a wisdom it just didn't have before.
So when you look at it this way, the journey isn't really about running away from our pain or trying to reach some kind of perfect, flawless state.
The real goal, the ultimate goal, is to become the healer of both of these halves, the masculine and the feminine, right inside of ourselves.
And so I want to leave you with one last thing to think about. What if the point of all this isn't to escape the wound? What if the point is to finally turn toward it, to really listen to it, and to understand what it came here to teach you?